We have a wide variety of different disciplines, which is really great. I think that's going to be beneficial today. As we talk about this topic, contextualized learning, this is one of my favorite topics. I think it really plays into our ultimate goals for our students, which is student success and ultimately completion. So I'm going to start off, not by really defining contextualized learning, but to give you a chance to get to know it a little bit better through some examples. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an overall goal that someone might have for their students, and then I'm going to give you two scenarios, scenario A and scenario B, two ways to teach to get them to that goal. Okay, so the first goal is to get students to learn how to communicate in proper Spanish. So this might be in a Spanish class. So the two scenarios that you could use to get students to this goal would be either scenario A, each student completes a written exam where he or she is given words in English and then asked to provide the Spanish equivalents, or scenario B, students are assigned to work within groups to create and present a skit representing a common social interaction such as visiting the doctor. How many of you think that scenario A is the most effective way to get students to the stated goal? Scenario A is most effective. Okay, how many of you say scenario B is the more effective way to get students to the stated goal? All right, I see almost all hands for this. What was it about scenario B that led you to the conclusion that that might be a better way to get students to the goal? Yes, Marty.
A practical application of the theory or the idea, the goal. So, you know, are they not only just able to think about it, but can they use it in an everyday scenario that they might use it in the real world?
Okay, a practical application. It's a real-world example of what the students are being asked to accomplish. Any other reasons why you chose scenario B as the preferred method?
The instructor sort of barrier of like, you're immediately right or wrong, there's a little less pressure there, and more time for them to problem solve.
Okay, so the students can actually work together and help each other in this process of learning. Any other reason why scenario B?
Well, it's active, but also it can be personally relevant. You've given them the opportunity to make a choice about which interaction they want to.
Okay, personally relevant. Excellent. Any other reason? Yeah.
On a base level, it's working in different modes as well. This person is just simply written, but they're not actually. That's one level of communication. But with a skit, they're probably writing it, they're probably saying it. They're working on multiple levels.
Okay. Different modes of learning, not only written but also oral and working together collaboratively. All right. Yeah.
Especially with language, I always say immersion is the best way to learn. It seems more immersion-based than traditional.
Okay. All right. An immersive experience to get to the stated goal. Yeah.
A doesn't seem like it has any context necessarily, but B is full of context.
Okay, getting back to contextualized learning. So B has that context, that real-world context that's lacking in A. Here's another example. So if you want students to learn the first two laws of thermodynamics, and by the way, does anybody know what the first two laws of thermodynamics are?
I think I know one.
Okay, what's one of them?
Energy cannot be created or destroyed.
Oh, yes. That's the first law of thermodynamics. Energy cannot be created nor destroyed.
I guess on that.
Does anybody know the second one? I'm going to actually pick on Lucia with...
That's what you pick on them there on chemistry paper.
Okay. Second law of thermodynamics.
You can't break even.
Okay. All right. So in any energy conversion, some will be lost in the form of heat. So to get students to know these two laws, either scenario A, each student answers multiple multiple choice clicker questions interspersed throughout a lecture on the subject, or B, students are asked to bring in their favorite snack foods and to make predictions concerning what will happen when the foods are burned in a calorimeter, and following combustion, they're asked to explain the results. Which would be maybe the preferred mode to get, or method to get students to the stated goal? How many say scenario A is preferred? Scenario B? Okay, all right. One more. Goal, students learn how to convert between different units. Either scenario A, students complete a worksheet that includes unit conversion problems, or scenario B, students are asked to calculate the price of a vacation to a foreign country of their choice, including transportation, housing, and food, taking into account current currency exchange rates. How many think scenario A is the most effective way to get students to this goal? Scenario B? Okay. There is not necessarily a right or wrong. Both scenarios would likely get students to the stated goal at some point. But what scenario B's in all cases have in common is that they are contextualized. They are an example of contextualized learning, which, as you mentioned, is presenting the course content and skills within the context of real-world situations that are of interest to students. And I highlighted the 2 points that are really important for contextual learning. Putting course content within real-world situations, real-world context, that is of interest to the students. When the students see the real-world relevance, it gives them motivation to learn, and it also allows them to build some sort of foundation that they can then build upon with the new information. Another aspect of contextualized learning is that it allows students to build new knowledge upon previous knowledge. If you give them a real-world example, they already have something to grab onto. They already have a foundation. And our students are coming in with their own experiences, with their own knowledge. And this will allow them to be able to build on that knowledge for more meaningful and deep learning that allows them to even retain that knowledge further. And this really falls under constructivism, which is a really well-known learning theory, the theory of building upon previous knowledge. Another aspect of contextualized learning is it helps students to find and create meaning through experience. Students often have a really hard time with abstract ideas, but when ideas are experienced within a certain context, then they are more understandable. They have meaning. And then finally, contextualized learning involves authentic assessment. And by authentic assessment, I mean assessments that are in the context of something that represents some real-world aspect of how that content or how those skills would be used in the real world. So this is contextualized learning, and we know that contextualized learning has the added benefit of allowing for student engagement, because if students see the relevance, if there's something that they can latch onto, then they tend to be more engaged. They tend to be motivated to actually participate in their own learning. We also know that contextualized learning leads to better retention of the content. If they are building and integrating new knowledge into knowledge that they already have, it's more meaningful, it's more deep learning. They're going to hold on to it for much longer. Better student engagement, better retention of knowledge leads to our students doing better in their courses, so being successful in their courses, and ultimately to being more successful at completing college, which is the big goal for our students, that they are successful in their courses and that they complete college. So this is a way for us to get our students where we want them to be. Now I'm just going to give you a really brief example of how I've been able to use contextualized learning in my own course. And I teach biology. And in any of the sciences, one of the very foundational concepts that we have to cover is the scientific method. How many of you have learned the scientific method at some point? Okay. If you've taken a science class, this is probably something that was included in that course. So this schematic just shows the scientific method. It's a series of steps that scientists go through to understand the world around them. It's the process of science. It usually starts off with asking some sort of a question, and that question leads the person to then do some background research that then leads them to a hypothesis or an educated guess to answer that original question. And then based on that hypothesis, an experiment is designed, a controlled experiment, to test that hypothesis. Data is retrieved from that experiment, and that data is analyzed, conclusions are made. If the hypothesis is true, then that result is reported. If the hypothesis is false or partially true, oftentimes the hypothesis will be reworked and the process will begin again. And it's kind of an iterative process where you can go back and forth between steps. Often, how the scientific method is taught in a science course is very early. It's usually one of the first things that's taught in the course. The students are taught all these different steps, and then often they take some sort of quiz or an exam about the order of steps and how they relate to one another. And then later in the course, oftentimes there will be different activities where the students go through the process, but they're given the steps, they're given a question, and they're given the background information through a lecture, and they're basically given the hypothesis. They're given an experiment procedure to go through, and they already know the results before they even start the experiment. And it's not truly an authentic foray through the scientific method. So I've come to think that a better way to teach the scientific method to my students is by actually having them do the scientific method in a very authentic way. So in my general biology honors course, what I have done is I have converted the lab into a semester-long laboratory experience where the students actively utilize the scientific method in a very authentic way to investigate a question of social significance, something that they might care about. They are asked to come up with their own question, to do their own background research, to come up with a hypothesis based on that research as a group, to come up with an experiment, to perform that experiment, get results, analyze those results, come to the conclusion themselves, to authentically go through that process. And I have a little video that highlights this process in my course, and I'm going to show you this video. And in the video, it's about 4.5 minutes. I explain a little bit more about this lab, but what I really want you to focus on is the commentary of the students. You're going to hear from them and hear a little bit about their experience as they went through this lab. So again, it's about 4.5 minutes. I want you to focus on what the students are saying.
Your general class is kind of everybody sits down, teacher lectures, that's about it. Whereas this class, you're fully involved.
This lab was based on a model that was already shown to be successful at Penn State University, Lehigh Valley. It's a 4-step model. The first step is where students are introduced to the study concept, they're introduced to the study system. Step 2 is that the students are working together in groups to formulate and design an experiment in which they test a variable of their choosing. And step 3 was to carry out their experiments, gain results. Step 4 was to analyze those results, write up a lab report, and communicate their results to a diverse audience. The overarching umbrella question that I gave my students was how to best grow Chlorella vulgaris. It's an algae species that is commonly used in the production of biofuels. And so they had to look in the literature and come up with not only a variable, but an experimental design in which to cause algae cells to grow faster.
This lab was very different because it was very hands-on. Instead of just copying a lab process from a manual saying this is what you need to do to get these results, it was like, here, try this and maybe you'll get these results. It was It was actual science. It was really interesting because I've never had a lab class that was like that.
The best part of the lab experience was the teamwork, getting to use the different skills that people brought to the table and using them for the betterment of the group as a whole. We can apply all of these things that we learned in the lab, especially teamwork, objective reasoning, data analysis is really important in the real world.
The scientific writing, I've read them before, but I've never actually attempted to do one, and that was just a great experience. Overcoming those boundaries with myself and learning how to actually write that scientific paper, and it's just a good opener for me.
Last bio class I took was in sophomore year of high school. I got a bad grade in that class. I just didn't like it at all. I'm doing pretty well in this class. It's probably the best class I've taken here at Citrus so far, and the fact that we're actually doing real type of work, it just kind of makes you more motivated to put in your best effort.
With very little biology skills and biology knowledge, I was able to learn so much more through the experiment. We don't learn best by just taking notes, by just reading a book. It's the hands-on processes that really help us understand what we are learning in the classrooms.
I've learned so much more than I think I would have just taken the regular classes because I'm doing the work. I'm actually now looking at biophysics because I do want to get into astrobiology. Working with algae is really cool to see, firsthand. It's something that I've never done before, and I absolutely loved it.
Initially I thought it was going to be difficult. However, at the end of the class I wish I had more time to be in it. It was something that I enjoyed and looked forward to every week. I think that every student should take a class like this. I wish there were more classes like this. It's open and engaging, and it's a real-world application. You're not just reading out of a book and learning definitions. You're learning how to apply science to life.
The last day of lab, seeing their presentations, the skills that they had built as scientists to take information and find information and work together in groups and communicate what they had learned in a very effective, meaningful way was just astounding. The students are much better prepared for the world in which they're going to enter after they do a lab like this. They gain the skills that they need to be successful.
Okay, so I asked you to really concentrate on what the students are saying, because ultimately that's what it comes down to. Was there anything that stood out from you about what the students said? Anything that was really meaningful that stood out to you? Yeah.
The students said that they look forward to coming to class, and that's incredible if we can get them to look forward to coming to class every time.
Yeah. So motivation to actually participate in that learning process. Yes.
You really get a sense that they've developed some confidence, even though the one class was meditation learning, the other developed. They gave them enough confidence that I imagine they feel like they can go on and do things that they think they can do.
Yeah, building that confidence, building those skills, and that resilience as they work through these real life problems. Yeah.
Heightened interest in the class. Like one gentleman said, last time I was sophomore and it sucked. I didn't do well this time. I did great. I love it. The engagement, I think, is huge. Just getting students to engage is difficult.
Yeah, giving them something that they could be interested in and could engage with and understand on a different level than just taking a test or being lectured on something. Yeah.
To me, I think they kind of told us, everything. He said that this is the best class I've had in Citrus. I mean, they're kind of telling us that they want more of that, and I think it's pretty clear that they learned what they needed to learn, but they were the ones that really got the most out of it.
Yeah. So ultimately, we are here for the students, so it's important for us to listen to them and what they need.
I mean, because I guess for me, sometimes I worry, are they getting all the content? Are they getting all the content? But obviously, if they can pull off something like that, actually getting to the point of designing a method and researching and doing it, they're actually going beyond just talking theory about it.
Yeah.
pretty compelling.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes.
I like the solidified one student's major. Switch to what I do from another.
Yeah. So becoming engaged where they want to pursue this further. Yeah.
I don't know, because you taught the class, so, but it seems like they would experience mistakes in a different way than on a paper or pencil of like, oh, this just doesn't add up, or this doesn't fit the pattern. But when they actually get the opportunity to see the visual evidence of a mistake or something that doesn't work out, I'm sure it's different. It becomes three-dimensional for them.
There's so much learning in failure. And what was talked about earlier, growing that growth mindset, not being afraid to fail. Okay. At this point, I want to allow you to have a turn here. So I'm going to give you an opportunity now to really think about how you can maybe make your class a little more contextual. I'm going to ask you to choose one of the course topics that you are required to teach in your course. And I love that we have a wide variety here, so there's lots of different topics that we can come up with. So I'm going to ask you to first identify a course topic on your course outline of record. And so just to give you an idea, I pulled up my course outline of record for Biology 105, and these are basically the topics that I have to cover every semester. And so I'm going to give you an example of what I want you to do using one of my topics. I'm going to choose number 13 on my list, immunity, basically the immune system. And then after you choose a topic on your course content of record or course record, I can bring this up if you forget yours today, so we can look them up if you need to refresh yourself on them. Then I want you to think about a way that you can frame that topic within some sort of real-world context that is of interest to your students. A real-world context of interest to your students. And then try to design some sort of authentic assessment. Again, an authentic assessment is an assessment in the context of something where that concept would actually be used in real life. And I'm going to give you an example from my class using the topic of immunity. In the case of my class, I have a lot of people that have children, and so something that they deal with is whether or not to vaccinate their children. Also, a lot of students in my classes either know someone who has autism or they have autism themselves. So vaccines and autism, these are two topics that are pretty pervasive within our society and that most of my students care about at some sort of level, or at least they can relate to. So to cover immunity, I actually have a class on this question right here, do vaccines cause autism? Because this is a very common idea that is actually becoming more and more common in our culture right now. And I want them to explore this and in that process to learn a little bit more about the immune system. So first I have them do a pre-assignment where they learn about how vaccines work, they learn about the pros and the cons of vaccines and how that relates to the immune system. And then in class I have them watch a short little video about some people who believe that vaccines cause autism, and they discuss about why they think vaccines cause autism, the reasons behind that. I then have students take those reasons and design an experiment, so working in groups to design an experiment to test whether those reasons would actually cause autism, if vaccines cause autism. And then I show them another short video of scientists talking about the work that they have actually done with scientific studies to test this very question, if vaccines cause autism. They talk about their results. And then students are asked to answer this question using scientific, real valid scientific evidence. And then recently we had a law that was passed in California requiring that students are vaccinated before they can attend public school. So I have them discuss this now based on everything that they know as far as vaccines and how they work in the immune system, the pros, the cons, whether or not vaccines cause autism, and just discuss the implications of that law. So that's something that I do in my class. I'm going to give you 10 minutes actually as individuals, so I'd like you to work as individuals on this for about 10 minutes. Again, identify a topic. Think about how that topic could relate to a real-world context of interest to your students, and see if you can design some sort of authentic assessment. I'm going to give you about 5 to 10 minutes. We'll see how long this takes, but just really, I want you to give this some thought for at least the next 5 minutes. And I'm going to ask you to work as individuals on this part. Okay, I know a lot of you are talking about this with others. I'd like you to spend at least the next 5 minutes or so telling your ideas to someone else, and then maybe getting some feedback, because oftentimes our view tends to be a little limited, but we can get a whole new perspective when we talk about it with someone else. So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes now to share your ideas with 1 or 2 people around you, and help each other. All right. In about 1 minute, I'm going to ask if people are willing to share. So think about if you're willing to share about your ideas to the larger group. In 1 minute. All right. I love the discussion. It's just from walking around, very, very productive discussion. You have some very creative ideas. I'd like to take a couple minutes to share with the rest of the group so that other people can hear your creative ideas for what you could possibly do in your class, and maybe even to give you some feedback on your ideas from other perspectives in this room. So would anybody like to volunteer to share what they've come up with? So anyway, I wish you a wonderful semester, and this is one of my favorite topics. I'm happy to talk with you more about it at any point. Good luck. Thanks. Thank you.